Can the busiest airport on Earth go silent in just days? That question feels impossible, almost absurd, until you begin to see the first cracks forming beneath the surface. At its peak, Dubai International Airport was more than an airport. It was a living machine, moving millions, connecting continents, and sustaining an entire economic ecosystem. Every minute, aircraft lifted into the sky carrying passengers, capital, and opportunity. Dubai wasn't just a destination, it was the bridge between east and west, constantly in motion. Transit passengers flowed endlessly through its terminals. Many never even stepped outside the airport. Yet their movement alone powered airlines, hotels, retail, and global financial activity. But systems built on constant motion share one hidden weakness. The moment movement slows, even slightly, pressure begins to build quietly beneath the surface, unseen but dangerous. The disruption didn't begin with chaos, it started subtly. Rising regional tensions, airspace warnings, insurance premiums quietly increasing, small signals that most travelers never noticed at first. Then came the first flight reroutes, aircraft avoiding certain corridors, longer routes, delays stacking up, airlines adjusting schedules without making headlines or triggering immediate panic. Cancellations followed next, scattered and selective. A few routes here, a few flights there, nothing dramatic, but enough to interrupt the delicate rhythm Dubai depended on. Transit passengers were the first to disappear. Unlike tourists, they had options, alternative hubs, different routes, and slowly they began choosing paths that avoided uncertainty altogether. Airlines responded quickly, frequencies reduced, routes consolidated. Some carriers paused operations temporarily, waiting for stability. Others quietly shifted capacity to safer, more predictable regions. What looked like minor adjustments began forming a pattern. Fewer arrivals, longer gaps between departures. Terminals that once pulsed with energy started to feel unusually quiet. Inside the airport, the change became visible. Empty seating areas, silent gates, duty-free stores with fewer customers. A space designed for crowds suddenly felt oversized and hollow. On the runways, aircraft remained parked longer than usual, engines off, crews waiting. The constant motion that defined Dubai's identity began slowing into something unfamiliar. This wasn't a sudden collapse, it was a gradual withdrawal. Movement didn't stop overnight. It faded, step by step, until the absence became impossible to ignore. And that's when the deeper reality emerged. Dubai was never just a city attracting visitors. It was a system designed to keep people moving through it continuously. Hotels depended on transit traffic. Airlines relied on connecting passengers. Retail thrived on short stays. Even real estate benefited from global mobility feeding long-term demand. When transit weakens, the entire structure feels the impact. Not immediately, but inevitably. Like removing pressure from a system built to operate at full speed at all times. The silence of the airport wasn't just physical. It represented something deeper. A disruption in global flow. A pause in the very mechanism that kept Dubai alive. Because Dubai isn't powered by what stays. It's powered by what passes through. And when that flow slows, the consequences extend far beyond empty terminals and grounded planes. So the real question isn't whether flights can stop. It's far more unsettling than that. What happens to a city when the world simply stops passing through it? When instability rises, money does not wait for headlines. It moves early, quietly and decisively, searching for safety long before the rest of the world fully understands what's unfolding. At first, the skies carried that urgency. Private aviation bookings surged overnight. Wealthy residents scrambled for immediate departures, turning airports into battlegrounds of priority, influence, and last-minute escape decisions. But as uncertainty deepened, even the skies became unreliable. Airspace restrictions, insurance risks, and unpredictable closures forced to shift. The escape routes moved from air to ground almost overnight. Convoys of armored SUVs began forming at the edges of the city, engines running, headlights cutting through desert darkness, carrying those who could afford options toward borders and uncertain safety. Journeys that once felt unnecessary became essential. Hours across harsh terrain toward Oman or Saudi Arabia. No luxury, no comfort, just movement away from a system beginning to feel unstable. For those still relying on air travel, the cost became staggering. Private jet prices surged beyond logic, with one-way flights reaching extreme levels few could have imagined just weeks earlier. But escaping physically was only the first challenge. The real complication waited beyond Dubai. Wealth does not travel cleanly across borders. It carries legal consequences that few anticipate in moments of panic. Tax systems in Europe and the United Kingdom do not recognize urgency. They recognize presence. Staying too long outside the UAE can trigger full tax residency, exposing global wealth to heavy liabilities. What felt like an escape route quickly turned into a financial trap. Days turned into thresholds, weeks into obligations. And suddenly, safety came with a price far greater than expected. Back in Dubai, financial signals began flashing red. The property market, once driven by confidence and global demand, started slowing. High-end properties lost liquidity as buyers disappeared overnight. Luxury apartments remained listed but untouched. Prices softened, then slipped further. Sellers became urgent, but buyers were cautious. A market built on momentum began losing its energy rapidly. On the stock market, sentiment shifted just as quickly. Shares tied to real estate and development, including MR properties, reflected uncertainty spreading through investor confidence. This wasn't a collapse. Not yet. It was hesitation. And in financial systems, hesitation is often the first signal that something deeper is beginning to change beneath the surface. The contrast across the city became impossible to ignore. Shopping malls stood quiet, their polished corridors echoing with absence, while outside, vehicles loaded with essentials moved steadily toward exit routes. Luxury boutiques remained open, but without customers. Restaurants prepared tables that no one arrived to fill. The illusion of normal life continued, but the energy behind it had already shifted. Wealth, for all its advantages, revealed its limits. It could secure faster exits, better transport, and temporary safety, but it could not eliminate uncertainty or protect against systemic risk. Because in moments like these, the rules change, systems tighten, borders redefine conditions, and even the most carefully structured financial lives face unexpected pressure from forces beyond individual control. The belief that Dubai was a permanent financial shelter began to feel less certain, not broken, but questioned. And in markets built on trust, even doubt can reshape behavior rapidly. Those leaving carried more than luggage. They carried unanswered questions about taxes, assets, residency, and whether returning would be as simple as leaving once had been before. And those staying watched closely, not just at the exits, but at the signals. Because when capital begins to move, it rarely does so without reason or without consequences following behind. So the real tension isn't just about escape. It's about what that escape reveals. If wealth begins to leave, even temporarily, what does that say about the system it once trusted? Beyond the silent airports and fleeing wealth, another reality exists, hidden from headlines. It is quieter, heavier, and far more human. A crisis unfolding where cameras rarely look. More than 3 million migrant workers form the backbone of Dubai's growth. They built its skyline, maintained its systems, and powered its services without ever becoming part of its visible success. These workers did not arrive with safety nets. They came with loans, obligations, and expectations. For many, reaching Dubai meant entering years of repayment tied to survival and sacrifice. At the center of their reality sits the Kafala system, a structure that binds employment, residency, and mobility directly to their employer's control and decisions. In stable times, this system functions with tension. In crisis, that tension becomes a barrier. Movement slows, jobs shrink, and suddenly, workers find themselves unable to act independently. As construction projects pause and tourism weakens, layoffs begin spreading quietly. Contracts end early. Hours are reduced. Entire teams are dismissed without clear timelines or guarantees of return. For many, leaving is not a simple choice. Without employer approval or proper documentation, mobility becomes restricted. Even attempting to exit can risk penalties, lost wages, or legal complications. Financial pressure builds quickly. Recruitment debts remain unpaid. Savings are limited. And without steady income, even basic living costs become difficult in one of the world's most expensive cities. Rooms designed for a few now hold many. Shared spaces grow tighter. Privacy disappears. And as uncertainty grows, so does the emotional weight carried within those crowded environments. Safety infrastructure tells another story. While the city's iconic zones are reinforced and protected, labor accommodations often lack the same level of emergency planning or physical resilience. The contrast is impossible to ignore. The same hands that helped construct landmarks like the Burj Khalifa now face a reality where leaving the city itself becomes uncertain. Opportunities shrink as industries slow. Service roles disappear alongside declining tourism. Construction delays ripple outward, affecting thousands whose livelihoods depended on continuous project momentum. Returning home for many is financially impossible. Airfare rises during uncertainty. Without savings, even a one-way ticket becomes an unreachable goal despite the desire to leave. Some continue working despite risk, holding on to the hope that payments will resume. Others wait, uncertain, balancing fear with the need to maintain whatever stability remains available. In this environment, time behaves differently. Days stretch longer. News spreads slowly through word of mouth. And every decision carries weight far beyond what it would in ordinary circumstances. The global narrative focuses on markets, investors, and infrastructure. But within the labor camps, the crisis is measured differently. In meals, in remittances, in the ability to endure another week. This is the unseen layer of Dubai's system. A workforce essential to its existence, yet limited in its ability to respond when that system begins to strain under pressure. Because while capital can move and borders can shift, these workers remain anchored, not by choice, but by structure, bound to a system that defines both their opportunity and their limitation. The deeper question begins to surface here. Not about economics, but about responsibility. When a system slows, who ensures that its most vulnerable participants are not left behind? Dubai's global image reflects ambition, scale, and possibility. But beneath that image lies a dependency on human effort that cannot be easily relocated or replaced during times of uncertainty. A global city powered by movement now faces stillness. And within that stillness, millions remain, waiting, working, and hoping for clarity that has yet to arrive. So the question becomes unavoidable. In a city built by millions of invisible hands, who protects those same people when the system they built begins to falter around them? What began as a slowdown in movement has now revealed something deeper. This is not just an economic shift. It is a structural stress test exposing hidden weaknesses. Tourism, once a constant engine of activity, begins to soften. Fewer arrivals, shorter stays, and cautious spending patterns quietly reshape an industry built on confidence and continuous global flow. Hotels remain open, lights still glowing, but occupancy fluctuates. The rhythm changes. What once felt automatic now depends heavily on stability returning sooner rather than later. Real estate tells a similar story. Supply continues to rise while demand becomes uncertain. Buyers hesitate, transactions slow, and the balance that once favored growth begins to shift. Developers adjust expectations. Projects continue, but momentum weakens. Investors who once moved quickly now pause, watching signals, reassessing risk, and waiting for clarity before committing further capital. This hesitation spreads across markets. Not a collapse, but a recalibration. Confidence, the invisible force behind rapid expansion, becomes more cautious, more selective, and far less predictable. Policy responses begin to emerge quietly. Authorities shift focus toward internal stability. Workforce strategies evolve, with greater emphasis on protecting local employment during uncertain global conditions. Hiring patterns adjust. Visa controls become more selective. Companies prioritize certainty over expansion, reducing dependency on rapid external hiring while attempting to stabilize internal operations. These changes are not sudden, but they are meaningful. They reflect a system adapting under pressure, attempting to rebalance after years of uninterrupted growth and global optimism. At the same time, the city's global image begins to shift. Dubai has long been viewed as a safe, reliable hub for business, travel, and investment across regions. Now, that perception faces questions, not because the system has failed, but because it has been tested in ways it was not fully designed to handle. The deeper issue becomes clearer. Dubai's strength has always been its openness. Its connection to global movement, foreign capital, and international labor created rapid, visible success. But that same openness creates exposure. And when global conditions tighten, reliance on external flows becomes a vulnerability rather than an advantage. Foreign investment slows, even slightly, and the ripple effects spread. Mobility declines, and industries feel it. Labor systems strain, and social pressures become more visible. This is not collapse, it is exposure. A system revealing how interconnected its foundations truly are and how dependent it has been on factors beyond its direct control. Dubai was never weak. It was highly optimized for a fast-moving world. But optimization comes with trade-offs, especially when the environment suddenly begins to change. The illusion was not growth itself, but permanence. The belief that momentum would continue uninterrupted, that global flows would always remain stable and predictable. Now, that assumption is being tested, not destroyed, but challenged. And in that challenge, the difference between image and resilience becomes increasingly important. Skyscrapers still stand tall against the skyline. Infrastructure remains impressive, but true resilience is not measured by height. It is measured by adaptability under pressure. Human systems matter as much as physical ones. Policies, protections, and flexibility determine how well a city absorbs shocks when conditions move beyond expectations. The contrast becomes clear. A city built on speed must now learn how to function during slowdown. A system designed for expansion must adjust to uncertainty, and within that adjustment lies the real story, not of failure, but of transition, a moment where reality reshapes perception and forces long-term reconsideration. Dubai's future is not erased. It is being rewritten under pressure. What emerges will depend on how effectively it balances openness with stability in a changing world. Because in the end, the question is not whether Dubai can grow again. It is far more fundamental than that, and far more relevant to the world watching closely. Can a city built on speed, movement, and global flow truly adapt when the world around it slows down and begins to move in a very different direction?